it's hard. There's no doubt. It's hard to move on from sport. I think that's why so many athletes who play at a high level, be it college, even high school, competitive, post collegiate, pro, of course, Olympians struggle when the sport stops, when they're past the prime age of competition. So how can we have a healthier relationship to movement and health and living that is not solely identified in that one pursuit, in that one thing where there's movement towards mastery. Balance is so important, and it's not just like the movement balance or nutritional balance. It's everything. It's having a balanced life. It's having a balanced relationships, balanced biorhythm, sleep cycle. We shouldn't always do the same thing the same way. We'll be out of balance if we do. I was a mover as a kid. I was playing sports from an early age, baseball, soccer, pickup basketball. I was a high school soccer player, wrestler. I found lacrosse late, actually, as a junior in high school, and then played lacrosse in college. But there was a period of time when I was a kid, I would say in middle school, between sixth and eighth grade, where I stopped playing competitive soccer and baseball, and I just skateboarded and played music. I was a drummer also. Um, so I bring this up because I reject the current club sports capitalistic model that athletics is kind of being like drilled into families and kids in our at least American society.
Hi there, I'm Sifu Slim. I am currently in Santa Barbara, California, where we're a few weeks away from Christmas. And I just got back from Tijuana, Mexico, where during the day it was shorts weather, sunny, and 25 degrees Celsius. So it was pretty warm and then, pretty crisp at night. So maybe beanie weather at night and bright and early in the morning. And while I was down there, I there are limited parks in Tijuana, which is one of my go-to places to exercise. Kids' playgrounds and parks are usually easily findable for me when it's early morning time. I can go there before school's open and get my hour and a half workout in, mind, body, and spirit connected, be barefoot and grounded to the earth. But in Tijuana, very limited on the park. So what I did yesterday morning, since I'm getting ready for skiing, is I ran up the stairs that are the fire escape stairs at this pretty nice hotel where I was staying. And that was from 0 to 12. And I'm doing it while it's dark out, but they had those sensor lights that allowed me to get light with each new set of stairs that I went up. So there's always a way if there's a will. I'm going to bring Dan Rosenak in, who's going to tell us a little bit about himself and where he's located right now.
Thanks, Sifu. It's an honor and a privilege to speak with you and be on your program. I live outside Philadelphia in Ambler, Pennsylvania. I'm sitting in my office in Fort Washington, which is one town over, and I work with athletes and active individuals to help people learn and implement yoga concepts and practices that will help them live healthier, happier lives and find a path to reach their personal and fitness goals.
So you're doing mind, body, spirit work, it sounds like.
We do movement, we do breathing, we do mindfulness, focus practices, concentration. We'll talk about nutrition, sleep, lifestyle. My yoga therapy practice is a comprehensive one that we try to lift every rock in someone's life, so to speak, and find out what the habits and patterns are, and how we can make small shifts to find better outcomes.
So, Dan, I often talk to people about balance. And so, because of my work with athletes before, during, and after their high performance years, and I'm up to about 2,270 long discussions or official interviews with athletes. And that doesn't just mean sports athletes, it could mean professional dancers, landscapers, general contractors, postal workers, UPS drivers, these types of things. And the idea of my study was to find out what happens to these people before, during, and after their high performance physical years. And my study, you may have seen, or I may have shared this with you, had found that unfortunately, more than 90% of these people become mostly sedentary starting the day that they leave their high performance activity. And so they could be a 17-year-old retired Soviet gymnast from the 70s, or they could be a general contractor who retires from climbing up ladders at age 60, or they could be a U.S. Marine who's done at age 23. The statistics are the same in all of these cases. So my goal with my third book, which is called Raising a Child Athlete, question mark, or Raising a Child Athlete, question mark, things you need to know, is to bring more balance, not just excessive win at all costs and risk everything, and put your mind, body, and spirit on the line for some medal or some new contract you're going to get, or to perform on stage in Carnegie Hall. It's to be more balanced. And you talked about mindfulness. And tell me if you've seen excessive personalities in your background, or if you've ever been that type of person in order to achieve something on the physical side, and how you would think with your training in yoga and mindfulness, what are some things that you did for yourself and you might do with some of your clientele to help them become more balanced?
That's a great question. And I think I'd love to share a bit about my background, and my athletic journey and health journey, um, to answer that. And then I'll tie in with some of my current work with clients. You talk about raising a child athlete. I love this title for the book, and I look forward to reading it, hopefully. I'm a father of two sons, 3 and 5 years of age, respectively. And I was a mover as a kid. I was playing sports from an early age, baseball, soccer, pickup basketball. I was a high school soccer player, wrestler. I found lacrosse late, actually, as a junior in high school, and then played lacrosse in college. But there was a period of time when I was a kid, I would say in middle school, between sixth and eighth grade, where I stopped playing competitive soccer and baseball, and I just skateboarded and played music. I was a drummer also. Um, so I bring this up because I reject the current club sports capitalistic model that athletics is kind of being like drilled into families and kids in our, at least American society. Um, and I'm somebody who was able to continue playing sports until today, and I will continue to be active and move. It shouldn't stop. And I think this time that I stepped away from soccer, specifically traveling soccer as a middle school boy, and did what felt natural at the time, which was skateboarding and playing loud rock music and with my buddies in my basement. That's what I needed to find balance at that time. One example.
Were you
Um,
shaking the house that your parents had to talk to you a few hours later, say, hey, could you guys not take the amp up to 11, as they say in that famous rockumentary? I'm drawing a blank on it, that rockumentary right now.
yeah, I am indebted to both my parents for putting up with it for all those years, but I still play the drums. That's something that has stayed with me as well. Um, Balance is so important, and it's not just like the movement balance or nutritional balance. It's everything. It's having a balanced life. It's having a balanced relationships, balanced biorhythm, sleep cycle. We shouldn't always do the same thing the same way. We'll be out of balance if we do. So I've found example two later in my life. I'm 38 in a couple weeks, 37 today. I played competitive lacrosse through college, in throughout my 20s, early 30s. I'm doing different things now. I'm not playing lacrosse, but I did play in for a master's level team a couple weeks ago on a trip to Hawaii, before we met, actually. And it was still fun. It was great to play on a team with my buddies and friends, people I know, and make new connections and enjoy that sport that has been such a big part of my life. But it's not something I need on a daily basis. Now I'm more interested in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and my surfing and other movement practices, my yoga. Um, so I think what I'm trying to get at is I try to stay open to change and growth and evolution, and balance is critical to that. And I try to stress that principle with my clients, that we want to identify what people love to do, like what makes you happy, and do more of that, and be okay with that changing, right? Like what's really fun this year might change next year. So keeping an open mind, I think, is what we try to um, lean into in my work with clients. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. And,
Yeah.
you have a pretty solid build, a mesomorph build, and there's another mesomorph. Can you see my screen currently?
I can.
So Aaron Pearsall, there's some of his early pictures where he looks a little more thin, but here in the picture where he's raising his arm, you can see that he's a pretty solidly built person. And swimmers
Yep.
historically have done a lot of weight training exercises. And so I happened to meet him in 2017 down at his job as a lifeguard, where he would have been in his later 30s, I guess, or maybe mid 30s. And he was at the Wedge in Newport Beach, which is a famous wave where
Yep.
John Wayne actually ended his football scholarship at USC because he injured himself. I think it was his shoulder, because this wedge, they built this jetty, and the way the waves come in and hit the jetty, it makes like this double impact, and it can throw that water up 20 feet in the air at certain times of the year. Anyway, that's how John Wayne hurt himself body surfing at the wedge. And Aaron Pearsall, a great swimmer. I don't know his surfing background, if he's got any of that, or boogie boarding background, but he's certainly built. Backstroke, I would think, is one of the best strokes you could have, that and breast, in order to be a lifeguard, because you do have to get to the person, but then you have to get them back in. And if you're used to being on your back and you need to carry that person, and you've got one hand and then occasionally you switch, backstroke would be a heck of a sport to have in this this gentleman, Aaron Pearsall, is America's, backstroking phenom of the last 20 years. And when I
Mm,
met him, I happened to meet him there. A friend of mine knew him, and Aaron coached my friend's son, who was a freestyler. And Aaron, this kid was 17 and a really big, strong kid. Aaron, going backwards in his mid 30s, was a lot faster than this really good high school swimmer was in his freestyle. And this kid in his freestyle was like the lifeguard champion freestyler, where they have to swim and then run on the beach and then touch the bell or ring the bell or something like that. So this
mm,
Aaron's really incredible. When you're a pro swimmer, an Olympic swimmer, you're really incredible. But when I asked him about his training, I'm a thin guy. I've done my share of weights, but I do more body weight, yoga, Pilates, bar exercises, running, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, this type of stuff. Now, I said, what do you do? And he says, I do a lot of yoga. And he said, I just want to maintain my flexibility. And when you were talking, Dan, about, your athletic background, I started thinking about Aaron, and he's got to functionally get to here and stay, the
mhm. Yeah.
less friction. The higher you are in that water, the less friction. So he's got to get to those positions and pull. And do you want to be clunky and stiff and overdeveloped if you're doing that? And the answer would be, of course, no. You want to be, yoga sized. You want to be stretched. You want to have the girth to do that pulling, nice wide shoulders. But you really want to be functional and in balance. And that brings us back to yoga. And you can tell me if some of this stuff's making sense to you.
So I wish that I had found yoga sooner than I did. But in a sense, I've always been practicing yoga. I just didn't understand or know um, about the tradition itself and the richness and vastness of the wisdom that it offers. Yoga is an ever evolving system of self realization, self help, self improvement that has that has changed over time and continues to. Why do we limit in our Western view of yoga to movements in a rectangular mat on a floor?
Mm-hmm.
I think anything that is done with awareness and integration can be yogic in its nature. So, talking about swimmers, you're reaching, pulling. If it's a backstroke, extending back, digging through, pulling through, kicking with symmetry and attention to detail, breathing, constantly balancing the body in water. I mean, what is more yogic than that? Like, swimming is yoga if it is approached with awareness and the proper intention. And I think the same can be said for anything. Um, I love that you're tying in this article, yoga for athletes. I mean, it's about developing awareness and integration of body, energy, breathing, the mind, and wisdom and spirit. And the yoga has a model for understanding that I can bring about too, if you're interested.
Yeah, it's the yoga as union, mind, body, spirit, karma, attention, focus. You can keep going with important human attributes of being, in one with the task at hand. And oftentimes our task is to just be present. Often our task is being part of a community where there's kids walking by, elders walking by, delivery people, weather patterns, dogs, whatever. And we have to fit, like walking through an airport and walking up to the escalator and going through and maybe pulling our baggage. We have to fit in that matrix and but not do any harm, not disrupt that flow, and also
Mm.
get to our destination. And sometimes our destination is waiting. For example, coming back from Tijuana, where I was for 3 days, I'm on an Amtrak, and I was on several different transportations: bus out of Tijuana, get across the border, then um, a smaller train, trolley they call it in San Diego, up to the Amtrak in Old Town San Diego, to Los Angeles, where I had to walk with my pretty large backpack through a big crowd of people at 8 o'clock at night, where it's dark, and a lot of people who are on the survival side of life right now, homeless and others, and having mental issues, and get to a bus where we had a pretty full bus. And we're getting on there, and there are some seniors who were traveling. I was really impressed that these people were traveling late at night, husband and wife, it looked to me. And these people were, functionally disabled, not easy to make a step up or down, and not easy for them to know, where they had to get off. So they're out there doing what people who weren't that old were doing, and they made it. But I had to wait. I was in sort of the three quarters back of the bus, and I kept my area from cutting through where these seniors were and where some other people were getting bags out of the overhead, because I thought that was the right thing to do. And I'm not a big warrior size looking, but I think I am a warrior in my mental, for the right cause, not to dominate people, but to keep everything fair and functional. And what my pause allowed these seniors and the other people the time they needed to get off. And we weren't going to miss our connections or anything. We had plenty of time. They set it up that way. But fitting into this matrix in a holistic and a balanced way, to me, is a big part of life. And you as a dad would probably know all about patience and pacing, and in terms of getting your kids to where they need to go in a safe way.
Yeah, yoga teaches us to accept reality as it is. And I think that is a challenge for many of us in today's fast world where there can be conflicting information, there can be um, mental habits and patterns that affect the way we see things. But yeah, I love your example of like going with the flow, like do no harm, ahimsa. This principle um, of being in harmony with reality and nature,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
not controlling it or attempting to be outside of it in some way.
It reminds me, Dan, of the concerts that we've all heard about, where some people pushed through an area that was like a funnel, where we had a massive width going down to a narrow funnel, and somebody fell and got trampled by hundreds of
Mm,
people. And when you think about it, the it's like a mass hysteria, and it's no accountability, because the person that finally is in that line and steps on somebody and sees the damage, they can't turn and stop a horde of people. It's like a herd of buffalo going over a cliff. You can't stop that
mm,
thing. So we as humans don't really have a loud enough voice to do crowd control to stop something like that. And the only thing that I can think of is teaching young people, starting at age 2 and 4. We teach them about going across the street, not running out into traffic. We teach them all
mm.
kinds of other safety issues and behavior with their siblings and their friends. Maybe we have to do a little bit more about teaching people about being present, breathing, and assessing, and just waiting 30 seconds to find out what's happening out there, rather than being a member of the horde, a member of the what would you call that? The impinging and impending doom of the heightened state of emotions of a horde of people.
I recently read an article about teenage depression, mental health, and mindfulness interventions in schools. So we're talking about high school students. Obviously, I think most people are aware there's a lot of conversation about depression, mental health, in these times, in this age group especially. But what was interesting was the article pointed out that many of these interventions that are happening in schools, like mindful breathing, um, different concentration practices, a lot of these, according to the research, haven't really proven to be that effective in large studies. And one of the reasons that was noted for this gap is that the culture of schools is based on assessment and achievement. It's about moving the herd through
Yeah.
as fast as possible
Yeah.
and doing as much as possible, getting, test scores, standardization. So how to slow down in this culture of fast? Um, there's a mismatch, right?
Yeah.
There's other reasons these techniques are, have a lack of effectiveness. But what was noted in the article as being highly effective and proven by many studies, a lot of research, is the free stuff that's simple, outside time, being in nature, nutrition, the arts, sleep. Yet kids are overbooked all afternoon with sports practices, activities, homework. It's like do more, do more, do more, do more, and we're not sleeping enough. And these issues can like compound over time. And I think this is why we have these mental health trends in our societies. We're not getting those basic things: outside time, healthy
Too,
nutrition.
too much rush. And
Yeah.
when I go back to what would I call it, the root of wisdom and functionality, I use the hunter gatherers, and I fortunately grew up on a farm in New Jersey where
Mm.
we had fields and woods, and we had farm animals and deer and pheasants and foxes, and then we had a river down below, and then all kinds of other, rolling hills and the part of New Jersey that's very similar to Pennsylvania. And so I was fortunate to have experienced that, a lot of camping outside, a lot of hiking, hunting, fishing, farming, all these types of things, and a lot of sports as well. So I was a busy kid, but normally what I would do is I would have one semester per year where, I guess it was, I don't know if we called them, I guess they're called semesters, but we had three of them per year. When you grew up, were they called semesters?
In
High
grade
school?
school, I think, yeah, it's a good question. I'm forgetting. I guess fall semester, quarters. I think it was quarters for us.
Okay. So
First term, second term. Yeah.
I guess we had two semesters, but we had three sports seasons. That's what I wanted to say. So
Right.
I took one sports season off typically, and that was winter sports. I liked wrestling, but wrestling
Mm.
was one of the hardest workouts at most of the schools that I've talked to people about. High school wrestling was typically the hardest sport. I think cross country running was probably more boring because you're on the same roads and trails all the time. But high school wrestling, you're also in the same room all the time. So that could get pretty boring. But it was the hardest sport because you had to do endurance and you had to do for the big guys, the endurance was hard. And for the little guys, all the lifting of other people, putting them on our backs and shoulders and carrying them, firemen carry, these things were so tough. And I'm not only thin, I'm tall. So it makes it really hard
Mm.
to carry. It makes it really hard to do the rope climb. I'm reasonably good at chin-ups for a person with my build because I work on them and I've been working on them since I was 8 years old or something. But it was the hardest sport of the year. So I did football, and I was a manager in the beginning because I was too little to play my first 2 years. And then I did football, and then I did golf in the spring season. So I thought that plus my weight training in the wintertime, which I amped up a bit, and then my farming and hunting and getting my grades, getting a little bit ahead. And by the time you're a junior, you're doing your college applications. I was in some essay contests and some other things unrelated to my normal curriculum at school. So I had a lot of stuff going on, but I thought that that downtime of not having three sports a year that were heavy duty was very helpful to me in my development. And part of that translated to me being a lifetime athlete, whereas my book, The Aging Athlete, which talks about this 90% becoming sedentary, a lot of my friends who did two or three sports became part of that 90% of sedentary people. And these were people who were really phenomenal athletes, energy galore in high school, and then
Mm.
became workers, dads, um, hanging out in bars and maybe putting on pounds. This type of thing was what came out of that for most people. Unfortunately, that didn't happen to me. So maybe share with me some of your thoughts around that, Dan.
Well, first of all, it sounds like you had a nice setup as a youngster with that exposure to nature and lots of different um, activities and things to do. Um, I also grew up in New Jersey, more of a suburban environment, little less exposure to outside stuff. My parents were not athletes. They were. I love them both. They met working in the theater industry in Manhattan, New York City. So um, yeah, it's interesting. You talk about balance, like that semester off of or quarter
Season.
away from that season away from
Yeah.
sport. It's like that was probably very formative and influential in how your development and growth was shaped. I think seasons are critical. I think that's why kids should play more than one sport or do more than one activity, not just the same thing all year. So we can become more well-rounded and have different teachers and meet different friends and form different relationships and exercise different parts of the brain and the body. Um, this like specialization trend in youth sports, I think is so off the mark. It's like hindering human development, actually. You might become a better, lacrosse player or something if you do that all year. But what are you missing out on? What's the opportunity cost? Um, that's something that I think about a lot, and how to be well rounded, how to do many things that you enjoy. Um, and seasons can be a great way to ground that. Growing up on the East Coast, we have 4 seasons. So now it's snowing this morning. It's December, right? We're coming into winter. Um, Things feel different, right? Like I lived for almost 9 years in San Diego and Honolulu, and I can remember feeling at least a little bit out of balance when like the weather doesn't quite change the way my body expects it to. Um, so, two places I love and will always visit and may return to at some point. I don't know, but right now I think it feels good to me to raise my two boys in the same time zone I grew up in. I have a physical connection to the 4 seasons. Um, for some reason, every year around the winter time, the early springtime, we feel this energy, right? Like we're coming out of winter, we're moving into warmer weather. And for so many years, that for me meant preparing for lacrosse. Again, I started playing lacrosse late as a junior in high school. That's unheard of today. No one starts playing as a junior in high school and goes on to playing college. Like there's just kids are too good starting earlier to allow that to happen. But I was lucky, I guess, and maybe a little athletic. But now every winter or spring, I feel like I want to pick up my lacrosse stick. So this morning, I think, oh, okay, gonna go do this talk with Sifu Slim. I'm gonna go to my office. I could drive there, 5 minute drive, 10 minute drive around, or I could walk through the forest, take the trail, walk along the creek. Maybe I'll bring my lacrosse stick with me. Might be cool to cradle the ball and skip down the trail and do some roll dodges. Just enjoy the walk, enjoy the snowflakes coming down. Like what a gift that is. So balance, seasons. Why do I have this connection to pick up a lacrosse stick in the winter or springtime? I think it's because I have this established biorhythm at this point that this is almost lacrosse season. It's almost time to play lacrosse. In the springtime, we play lacrosse. My body knows that on some level. So I don't know how that lands. What do you think?
I I think I think it's fun to change. I think
Mm,
we should be thinking less about specialization and the highest achievement in one area for whatever the reasons are, and we should do more balance. So
right.
here's Jim Brown, who played 8 years, I believe, as an NFL running back and achieved great things. And then he had enough. He may have had enough after four, but the amount of money he made in the 1960s was limited. A lot of the pro athletes of the 60s and 70s had summer jobs or maybe even jobs during different seasons. So, I would guess in 1965, an NFL lineman might have made $40,000 a year. Now you could buy a house in Nebraska with $40,000, but after taxes, your 40,000 was 32 or whatever it was. And now if you need a car and you want to raise a family, you probably have to have another job. So here's Jim Brown, one of you could say that physically gifted, he had it all. He had size, he had speed, he had coordination, and he had desire, and he had high intelligence. He became a spokesperson for a variety of causes during his football career and after. I don't know what he was like in college, but I would guess that he was a very well spoken individual. I'll have to look up what his life was like growing up, or if some people they could grow up in a trailer park, and I'm not saying anything about Jim or anyone like Jim, but you could grow up in a trailer park and just be a gifted person with mind and elocution and being interested in certain things. So, but Jim
Mm,
Brown, who had a scholarship, I'm sure, at Syracuse, also played lacrosse. And if there was, a pro lacrosse league back then, he probably would have been able to make that team because of his incredible athleticism and probably love of lacrosse. So I think, we're talking a lot about cross training the last 30, 40 years and now high intensity interval training. I think doing these types of things, and like Aaron Pearsall, the swimmer, backstroke guy, doing yoga in therapy, and then meeting with Dan for the mind, body, and spirit, and finding ways to hone that practice of balance towards some things that someone wanted to work on. I think all of that stuff together is like having the medicine man or medicine woman of the tribe being available to you, the tribes person who's going through life and wants to develop some different skills and some different mindfulness practices and personality, working on some personality things that you want to improve.
so I love that you bring up Jim Brown. I have a personal connection to him through my grandfather, who played high school football, basketball, and eventually lacrosse when he went to boarding school. And it was there that Jim Brown's high school, Manhasset High School on Long Island, New York, did a New England tour playing prep school teams. Um, and it was there my grandfather met Jim Brown. Um, and I think he took a couple face-offs against him. He told me the story so many times. Jim Brown recently passed away, actually, but before he did, he was involved in the emergence and growth of Major League Lacrosse, the first professional league um, in the United States for field lacrosse, and also the Premier Lacrosse League, which is now the main institution for the pro game. Um, and you're right. He always said lacrosse was my favorite sport. I think he would, I've heard him say it made him a better football player. Um, and yeah, I mean, he's revered in the lacrosse world. He's revered as a just a total athlete, a total integrated being, mind, body, spirit. Um, if you watch videos of him carrying the ball as a running back, I mean, he's just so athletic, moves so well. Um, Years later, fast forward from grandfather facing off again, and he's probably losing all the face-offs against Jim Brown in high school. My grandfather lives in LA and runs into Jim Brown. I think they were lined up at an ATM at a bank or something.
Mhm.
He recognized him. He recognized Jim Brown. I don't think Jim recognized my grandfather, but small world. Interesting how things come full circle sometimes.
Jim Brown, we just saw his body with his pads on for the Cleveland Browns. And I'm going to switch over to somebody here that many people remember.
Jim Brown was also very in tune and interested in the Native American roots of lacrosse.
Hmm.
And he always respected the roots of the game and prioritized emphasizing that.
Didn't come up. But I have Bo Jackson also shirtless
Mm,
on my screen. And he's pretty much got the same build as Jim Brown. And it's the athletic build without pumping any iron, developed
mm.
and athletic and fast and, in a relaxed state. So it's a really, it's hard to compare an athlete like that with someone who has to pump iron to put on, 40 pounds. These guys, showed up at age 17 or 20 with just that fully developed without pumping any iron.
Yeah, Muhammad Ali didn't lift weights.
He chopped a lot of wood, and his mother had a reasonably sizable build. I don't know what his dad's family was. His dad wasn't very big. His brother Rudy was pretty good size, about the same size as Muhammad, maybe a little bit thicker in the upper body. But Ali I studied three people more than anyone else, and it'd be John McEnroe, Michael Jackson, and Muhammad Ali. And they're all natural movers, and they all have natural ability to see what the occasion needs. Michael Jackson had that on stage and also in the studio. And then McEnroe, of course, was a good soccer player, pretty darn good soccer player. Probably could have gotten a college scholarship at some colleges, and then got into tennis when he was 12 and decided, when he was 17 and could beat people who were ranked pros, that maybe I could make a living at this. And he only had to do 1 year at Stanford. I think Tiger Woods also did 1 year at Stanford. So I would imagine that Tiger worked a lot harder. Very natural athlete, but I don't think McEnroe did. 6 or 8 hours of hardcore training of tennis. He probably did in high school something like 2 hours of tennis per day. And he was more of a gifted person with the hand-eye coordination and had a really good build for tennis, which is small upper body, at least in the era of the wooden racket, small upper body, stable and strong lower body, but ability to get around the court without a lot of mass, which later the game got a little bit bigger. We've got some pros who are 6'6" who can hit like a kick serve that bounces over your head. So some of that is a whole new game
Mm.
right now. But none of the top three players, as far as I know, that have lasted, 4 or 5 years in the top three have been bigger than Nadal. So he, Djokovic, and Federer are all in that 160 to 175, 180 pound weight class.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes.
Yeah. Are you familiar with someone named Moshe Feldenkrais?
Yes, I think Feldenkrais is phenomenal. Is his background in, I know Alexander's in the theater, Pilates, something else related to performance, I believe. You can tell me. And then Feldenkrais, what was his background in before he developed that?
Yes. So he's a really interesting guy, and somebody that I'm currently learning more about, researching, and I hope to train in his method um, sometime soon. He emphasized the quality of movement. He said something like, "Movement is life, life is movement. Improve the quality of movement, and you improve the quality of life." So this is kind of just a glimpse into his philosophy. But his background was in sport, martial arts. He became a judo black belt, and developed his own. He was also training in jujitsu, not
Wow.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but jujitsu
Japanese. Yeah.
from Japan. Yeah. Um, he grew up in what is now Ukraine, and he moved to Israel when he was about 14, I believe, to continue his schooling. And essentially, he developed um, a career in the sciences, um, and and then started to apply his learnings throughout his life and his sport life, his martial arts life to movement. I consider him kind of a movement scientist, philosopher type of person. Um, and one of my teachers in my yoga therapy training program is a Feldenkrais method practitioner and teacher. So yeah, I encourage everybody to look him up, Moshe Feldenkrais.
Yeah. I went to some small group workshops with some people in Santa Barbara back in 2004 through 2007, where and what would I call it? A kind of a master who was retiring from practicing in the Santa Barbara area came back. Sorry, he had left Santa Barbara and then he came back to help some of his followers with their enhancing the outreach for Feldenkrais in Santa Barbara. So I got to be at these small group meetings with 5 to 10 people periodically for a period of time, and that was very helpful. Now I would say I know a lot more about biomechanics and posture and
Wow.
physical movement than I did then, and I thought I was pretty good level then, but now I've just got another almost 20 years in on that area, a little more specialization and a lot more body awareness of my own body. So I think I'm glad you mentioned that, Dan. I think that's going to be something that's going to help me go back in and fine tune some of the movement and the therapy of Feldenkrais, and put that back into my game.
Yeah. Just like being aware of, like, as we do a movement, say like something, this is something I'll practice in yoga sessions or yoga classes that I teach. Like, this movement, the cat cow, rounding the
Mhm.
back, arching, extending the spine, just a simple movement, right? You can do a kind of a Feldenkrais method practice or lesson by just paying attention to what part of the body initiates the movement from cat to cow. Like, is it the hips? Is it somewhere in the thoracic spine? Is it the head or the cervical spine? Like, what's the initiator? What begins that wave? And then doing it differently. So, like, find out what our movement pattern or bias is, and then challenge it, try to change it, and see how the movement feels different and how it looks different. And we can observe other humans doing this. We can observe ourselves doing this. That's kind of a Feldenkrais principle, and practical application that anybody can do. Like, observe your movement and then try to differentiate and integrate.
I think that's perfect, Dan. I was historically, when I went to a chiropractor, not very good at relaxing for the neck uh, movements that they did to you, and putting your what is the neck area called again?
The cervical spine.
Cer the cervical
Yeah.
spine back in position. And so mine's a little bit out of position based on hip being a little forward and a little bit higher on one side. So of course that'll affect your whole kinetic chain. So, and because of a long neck, I was always a little touchy about relaxing when they did the neck thing. But now, after being in chiropractics for many moons, and I went from directional non-force therapy, DNFT, which is more activators and fingers, and sometimes an electric gun that gives you an impulse and pressure, to more historically standard chiropractics, where there is a manipulation and a popping, perhaps, of your cervical spine. So now, because for years the doctor used to say, "Wiggle your toe," or give me something that would trick my mind into concentrating on something other than my neck. Now I can just kind of do it, and it's just this practice of getting that
Mm.
therapy. And I think besides us taking care of ourselves, we can see in this one picture here Moshe Feldenkrais working on somebody. The uh, the idea of having someone work on you that knows what they're doing, and you trust them and you feel their intentions, it's just kind of a letting go and a release that I think it's very important. So just as important as for us to go out and do our walking or running or swimming every day, I think it's also important to have a therapeutic experience and resetting us, and reducing inflammation or massaging a muscle area, what have you, by someone who cares about us, has good intentions, and is improving their connection to us, like a massage person or like a Feldenkrais therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many gifted practitioners, from so many different backgrounds, offering different perspectives. And um, we should try to learn from as much as we can, right?
And then the
I
human dynamic energy of all these people in the same room, it does something to us.
totally yeah. There's this trend now of, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, like virtual yoga, for virtual, movement and coaching, and it can be very beneficial, um, to learn and try to apply things on your own. But being in the same space as other humans allows for an energy share to happen, and that's really tough to create and provide space for in these virtual spaces at this time. So yeah, like, again, going back to this idea of balance, like, I think a lot of people want to be efficient with their time and they want to become healthier, and like it's like, how do I find the time? I've got kids, I've got my job, I'm commuting maybe in a car or on a bus or a train, plane. How do I find the time to create space for my own body, but let alone like other people together in shared spaces? I mean, it's important. We have to prioritize it, even if it's once a week. Maybe you do your personal practice on the go when you have your little block of time at work or before work or after in the evening. Like whenever it works, do it. But once a week, you go to a group yoga class. You go to, you share a jog outside with some fellow runners, or you go swim in the ocean with some people, or the pool, whatever you have. It's like, what do you have access to? Leverage it. I think I met you on the beach in Santa Barbara after I got out of the ocean swimming with strangers. I was on, I was on my way back to the East Coast from this Hawaii trip and California trip. We were visiting friends in Santa Barbara. We haven't seen in too long, over 5 years. And my kids are still on Hawaii time, so I'm getting out of the house early, drive down to the beach. I throw my wetsuit on. I've got goggles. I'm going to go for a swim, and I meet these other people doing the same thing, and they're like, "Come on, join us, come swim with us." I think you might have met the one woman talking about the fish.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's like, that's a special memory. It wasn't just a workout. Like, I met a couple people. I met Sifu Slim, and it's just kind of following what's available, following your energy. If you're up for a swim, do the swim. If you're not up for the swim, maybe you exercise on the beach. Something what's right for your body on a given day. It's going to be different every day. But human connection is essential. It's part of the balance equation. We are not autonomous animals. We're social. We're meant to be with others.
So, Dan, maybe we could do some McKenzie stretches right now.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate that the algorithms of YouTube led me to Dr. McKenzie, and he's a physical therapist. I believe it's Australia, but it's somewhere down under. And he became a known entity in the 1970s, kind of worldwide known guy. And this was before the computer era, but it was still, the human being and the forward tilt, which you're doing basket weaving, arrow making, lifting. We're always forward. And so I always look to athletes like Greg Louganis from the 1980s, or United States famous diver. And he had more of a ballet posture. He was also half Samoan or some sort of an islander. And he he already had a good sized body, so he didn't do a lot of weightlifting. So he had that already had natural width and thickness to his bone structure. So he was really like another Bo Jackson type of a build. And so he didn't have to worry too much about doing a lot of lifting. He was already strong, so he could worry. I don't know if he did yoga, but he had incredible posture. And I'm sure if he's still physically active, he's probably still got really good posture. And, a lot of gymnasts and ballet people have that posture. The problem is they land on hard. Gymnasts and ballet people are landing on really hard stuff, the ballet more than the gymnast. And Greg Louganis is landing in the water, which if you land properly, it's, and let's say they have the bubbles going up through the water, it could be a soft landing, but they do it enough, there's certainly an impact. So it's that really nice posture where you do have the curves and you're balanced. And we've seen all the diagrams of the physiology of where our knee is supposed to be in relationship to the foot, the hip, and all these things. So what Dr. McKenzie figured out is that we had all this pelvic tilt going on down here, and then you also have a lot of people with the shoulders rounded over, and it's so common that it became a norm along the way of becoming sedentary people in office settings, and even the people manufacturing things. So McKenzie said, like I'm sure people throughout the centuries, when they had these problems, they said, you've got to open up. And there's a great stretch, which the two that I do every day is I plant the legs, so a little bit shoulder, a little wider than shoulder width apart. And then I just let the upper back go back. So this remains planted here. All of my hips are remaining planted. And then I let everything in the upper body go back. So I'm getting the diamond of the sternum going up to a comfortable level. And you can do different things with your hands. You could go low in the beginning because it's a lot of weight. And then as you get better at it, you can go arms up a little bit. And there you're done. You don't have to do a whole lot of time to do that. So let this lower spine, the lumbar area, go back a little bit, but keep those hips planted straight up and down like they were when you're standing upright, and let that all go back. So that's step one, is that one. And then step two is to let the hips go. And that means right here, I'm going to let these hips go back. Right there. And so I'm getting a lot of psoas stretch right there. And then same thing, the upper back is going back. And those are the two I try to do 5 times per day. And then you can do all your hanging exercises. You can do your, against the door frame stretches. You can grab branches and pull this way. All these other little easy stretches, they all complement each other. And it keeps us forward-leaning Homo sapiens in a more spine open position. So if you think about spine, I like to think about hockey pucks with Mexican cheese in the middle. And if you've got that Mexican cheese in the middle and you're always pressing forward on it, you're going to get bulge out the back and you're going to get crush in the front. And so that's where we are. We're crushing or not balanced. So you want to be as balanced on those hockey pucks as you can. And so over to you for some of your thinking, and if you've got any other mental cues that I should be thinking about with this McKenzie stretch, or if you've got another standing stretch you'd like to share with us that'll help us with that, doing the converse of the forward lean.
Yeah. So I like to, and again, I'm stealing this from my yoga teachers, but I call this the 5 domes. 5 domes, directions of movement of the spine. Directions of movement of the spine. So the spine can energetically lengthen. So imagine, just breathe and lift the rib cage. Imagine the spine lengthening. Imagine a set of pearls, a pearl necklace getting taller. So the spaces, these Mexican cheese spaces between the vertebral discs gets longer in between each one. So that's lengthening. Now we can side bend. Can you open one side of the body and compress the other? You could do this with hands above. You could grab elbows, wrists. You can just open one arm by the side, any way you like, or the other way. And as you do this, can you breathe into that big side lung? So for you, it's your left lung with the left arm overhead. Imagine this long stripe on the side of the left body getting longer. And then maybe just, I like to be dynamic, just flow through a couple each way, just so the body learns the movement. And breathe as we move. Always be breathing as we move. That's two directions. Your McKenzie stretch is beautiful. Spinal extension, opening. You can also do this with a variation on the door against a wall. So if you stand a little away from a wall and lean back in that McKenzie stretch, you can put the crown on the wall. So now you have support. Now you're doing that spinal extension, lengthening the spine, bending backwards, but you're supported by the wall and it takes a little pressure off the hips. You might notice that. That's three directions. The fourth one is the forward fold. So if you hang the body forward, you can bend the knees as much as you need to, let the head be heavy. This is opening the back. This is spinal flexion. The opposite of that extension posture you just took. And try bending the knees even more. Like, can you glue the ribs to the thighs? Kind of gorilla arms, hands come towards the floor. Maybe they're on the shins. Maybe they're on blocks or a bench or a chair in front of you. Everybody's anatomy and physical ability experience is going to be different. And just feel this opening of the rib cage backwards, three-dimensionally. As you come up, the fifth direction is the twist. So the spine can twist left, twist right. And I like to do kind of active water bucket tosses with people. So what do the feet do as you turn side to side? Can you see the hands pass the shoulder? Can you see that imaginary water getting thrown over the shoulder? And how do we breathe as we twist? 5 directions of the movement of the spine. And we can do these in any orientation. We can do these lying down, on the back, on the belly, side lying. Think about the cobra pose. Hips on the floor, belly on the floor, pressing hands below shoulders, or forearms on the floor, lifting up the heart, looking up. That's a spinal extension. You're just on the belly. Think about lying on the back. Hips go one way, knees go the other way. You have a twist. Supine twist. So all these different movements of the spine are happening all the time in daily life. When we're working at a computer, we're probably in flexion, right? And I think that's why so many of us, myself included, have had lumbar vertebral issues. This Mexican cheese is getting pushed out the back. It's getting squeezed too much. We have over-rounded shoulders. So learn backstroke. Do the McKenzie stretch. Do the opposite of your habit pattern to promote a happier spine. That's kind of how I approach spinal movement.
I think that's wonderful. I'm going to click on a picture here with someone performing Feldenkrais with, I guess it's a toddler. Is that what you call someone that size?
Yeah, it looks like a toddler to me.
I don't know how old toddlers are before they become little kids. I don't know if there's even a word between toddler and little kid. Do you know any words?
At our preschool, they call them it's infants, and then it's waddlers, and then toddlers, and then there's another level before preschool. But I think if it's like a 2-year-old, it's basically a toddler. They're
So
walking but not talking, maybe.
yeah, we're going to wind down here shortly. I just wanted to share in my last online interview, I had sports psychologist Dr. Brett Dinkin,
Mm.
and he was in Florida at the time. He's from Connecticut and went to college in Southern California. And what he coaches some high level athletes. And when we were talking about what some of my books are about, physical movement, balance, and doing the right thing and not burning out, all these types of things, not being excessive. He said that it's so competitive in most of these sports fields, like tennis. If you're not in the top 100, you're not making enough money to do the travel it takes to try to stay in the top 100 or just to play the tournaments that you're supposed to play. And many of the other sports, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some of these great athletes who win Abu Dhabi and win the world championships, they don't all have sponsors. It's not like a Nike Michael Jordan type of a thing. So they have to, you know, either have a YouTube channel that's kicking butt with video series and a school or a series of schools like Gracie Baja, and all these different schools. So you're taught at a very young age, you're 17 and now you're going for this world championship, that there is no, well, it's not that there's no time for second place, but certainly if you're not in the top in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're not in the top 50, nobody outside of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu knows about you. They know about Rickson Gracie and some of the great UFC, Royce Gracie, and they know Ken Shamrock, who's not a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, but he's done a lot of it. They know like the
Mm.
main guys because they're on YouTube a lot and they're on interviews, but they don't know the people who have won a world championship and are kind of unsung heroes. So it's this drive to be in the top 50 or the top 100 that turns these athletes into these excessive performance oriented people. And that brings them to potentially fallout when there's an injury, a divorce, a season shuts down, there's a player strike. So something can happen, car accident, a problem with an episode of violence or sex deviation or whatever it is. And then that person, after all those 10 or 15 or 20 years of work, is kind of cast out. And now where are they going to go? They can't even, go make a living at Denny's, perhaps. So it's an excessive industry, basically, being a sports pro, Olympic athlete or otherwise. And the whole idea of balance and being normal, like going with the flow, like I talked about on the getting through the airport and being part of the conveyor belt system and being patient, none of that is part of the training of these athletes. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, it's let me know if you stop hearing me. I'm getting a batteries low message in my headphones. So just give me a signal. Um, yeah, it's like, would you rather be a competitor at the top level of any given discipline and focus on that one thing only? Or would you rather have many passions and hobbies and pursuits and be well balanced and be able to flow with seasonal change, life change, circumstantial, adjustments that come up? Like, it's hard. There's no doubt. It's hard to move on from sport. I think that's why so many athletes who play at a high level, be it college, even high school, competitive, post collegiate, pro, of course, Olympians struggle when the sport stops, when they're past the prime age of competition. So how can we have a healthier relationship to movement and health and living that is not solely identified in that one pursuit, in that one thing where there's movement towards mastery. um, I think about Hickson Gracie. In his memoir, he talked about the way he trained. Like, he trained with Orlando Connie, who was doing animal movements and tying in yoga and philosophy. And his Hickson Gracie's mother was a yogi. um, Hickson Gracie wasn't just lifting weights and punching heavy bags in musty basements like some of the people that he saw in competition. He was if you watch this documentary, look at the difference between the way that guy from Nebraska was training and the way Hickson Gracie was training. Hickson Gracie's on the beach in California doing yoga, breathing. He's doing, cold spring baths in Japan, working on, keeping his mind calm under stress, under cold exposure. And this former football player from the Canadian football leagues in Nebraska is, tackling, uh, weighted dummies in a gym and punching heavy bags. Just look at the difference in the way they move and train and think. Um, so I think it's really important for everybody, and especially athletes, to search out ways to be more well-rounded. Do other things that feel good, that you enjoy. And the great swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, in his book The Five Rings, says, learn all arts and disciplines. So he defeated 60 people in duels. That's life or death combat. Well, he wasn't just rolling around on mats with a robe on. He was a master swordsman. He said, learn from every discipline. So I'll leave it there for that.
Here I have on screen Gimnastica Natural,
Yes.
and that's this incredible movement. What would you call that program of
Yeah.
it combines everything. There's some yoga, there's some calisthenics, there's some jujitsu looking things, some balance postures, crawling, and
Yep.
it's this beautiful progression of movement. And I'm sure there's many variations of it, but I think that was developed, the one that got popular in the 20th century. I think this one was developed in the 20th century. But maybe, the essence of that went back thousands of years. And then also, as you mentioned, the animal movement. So it's not hard to put together things that work, but it's really nice that when somebody perfects something and they put it into a program that has flow and functionality and fun, and the three F's. And then you've got Hickson Gracie who used this and had a bigger build than Hoyce because he had a different mother. His mother
Mm-hmm.
was Afro-Cuban, and so he had a little bit different build. He's not a large person, but he's larger than a number of his brothers are, his half brothers. And so he became this incredibly gifted athlete, and mainly because of his mind, was able to play the chess game better and learn the breathing better than people in his era. But I did meet him. He's on my LinkedIn page. I'm a big fan of Hickson's. Really enjoyed meeting him. But what happened to him, in my opinion, because he's got no discs between some of his vertebrae, so he had that going on for the last 10 years, I believe. He had so much forward posture and not enough, I'm guessing, therapy, too much performance. And then just when you're done with 2 or 3 hours of training in jujitsu, sitting down and having a meal. And if you're in that forward posture eating, even if you're eating good food, you never got the hanging, the extension, et cetera. And you've been doing all this heavy compression exercise and tweaking on all these Brazilian jiu-jitsu postures that he had that go on. And then more recently, I saw that he's got, what's the one where you is it Parkinson's? Yeah, I think he's,
Rickson Gracie has Parkinson's now.
so he's got Parkinson's. And so I said, how did he get Parkinson's? Because he usually won and he usually blocked punches if he was in an MMA type of thing. But I would guess that being, with his older brothers and cousins and other athletes as a 12-year-old, he probably got slammed to the mats enough. And, compared to the amount of jujitsu that I've done, let's say that he did, starting at age 4, an hour to 3 hours a day for 35 to 40 years. He just had so much more impact over and over. And even if you're not hitting your head, if you hit your back on the mat, getting thrown and landing enough times, and then occasionally on somebody's move, you get a knee to the side of the head. He just had so much more of that concussion than I did. And I think that's where he got it. I don't think it was from sparring and getting hit in the head a lot, but I'm open to hear more from Rickson and his brothers and his trainers about where that Parkinson's came from.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, he put his body through a lot over the course of his life, competing well into his 40s at least, I think, in
MMA,
Japan.
Yeah.
And I really love his memoir, Breathe, A Life in Flow. It's a great book to illuminate like how he approached training and competition and lifestyle, and how things changed for him throughout seasons of life and over the course of different family situations. Really, really interesting guy. Interesting story.
Try to
and he's still moving. He's if you you can follow him on Instagram now. Rickson Gracie is still active and doing teaching, sharing his gift. So
here's my LinkedIn page with Rickson
nice.
and I down at the
so
beach
cool.
in Ventura, and this was 2005. So I'm 43 at the time, so he's 45-ish at the time. And really, really fun guy to be around, and what a master. And he's not
he calls himself an artist. He says I'm an artist. He considered himself a martial artist, not not a professional athlete, but like a holistic artist. I love that.
I feel myself as an artist. I like to do things because it's beautiful, it's intense, it's edge, it's action, it's love. I like put my energy in life and intensity.
He got the breathing down. I think he has mastered 4 or 5 different breathing techniques so that he can call on them instantly when he's in a competition or he needs some relaxation. And that's something that, when I asked Luis Heredia, who's like Rickson's adopted little brother, who was part of Rickson's life for very close for a number of years, and then they're still very connected. But he's got Luis has 3 studios over in Maui, and I asked Luis about Rickson, and I said, was he just training more than everyone else? Take a guess what he told me.
What's that?
He said, no, it wasn't because of uh, his training more than other people, although he did train a lot. He said he got everything very quickly. And so
Yeah.
that's like a Bo Jackson or, great baseball pitchers. They say, here's the curveball. And they go, oh, okay, I get it. Here's the screwball. Okay, I get it. And they amass information. What's the better word? They master information better. And then they see the chess game. Like some people become master chess players or Rubik's Cube people more readily than other people. Other people have to work harder on it. And Hickson was one of those people. That's why they called your instructor at the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym professor. It's because it's not a physical thing like people think. It's not this weight training and thrust. It's really being a professor, like a chess master and an intellectual, because there's such a big intellectual game in mastery of movement, especially competitive movement, like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition or an MMA competition.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I train at an academy that is a Balance affiliate. It started in Philadelphia with Phil Micklerice, who trained under Helson Gracie. He actually was the first person to receive a black belt from Helson Gracie in North America, in the U.S. And Phil Micklerice also is a master yogi. He trained in India under Patabi Joyce, and my teacher received his black belt from Phil Micklerice. So last night was appropriately our first yoga session at my jiu-jitsu academy. My coach, Randy Aiken, is we've been talking about this for a while. He's like, jiu-jitsu and yoga are like peanut butter and jelly. They go together perfectly. So I'm starting to share yoga with, my teammates, my training partners, and the community there. Just to tie these things in, like better breathing, better balance, understanding posture more. There's this huge tendency in grappling sports to be forward, shoulders rounded forward, right? So, like, get a Swiss ball, get a yoga bolster, get a couch, and lie across it. Just support that open heart posture, on a regular basis. So. We're doing some different things with yoga and in the gym, and trying to help people find ways to weave it into their lives. But it's just, awareness of body and breathing.
Dan, share with us your website.
Yeah, great question. My website is flowstateyogotherapy.com, and I will let you know when it's live.
Okay.
It's still under construction.
It will be.
I own the domain. We're working on it. People can follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Flow State Yoga Therapy, one word on Instagram. And I'm starting to, share more through that medium.
Good. And I'm Sifu Slim at sifuslim.com or theagingathlete.com. And aging doesn't mean you're old. It just means each week and each year is different. And the aging process is something that should be welcomed. It should be received, and it should be assessed. And it's fun. Sometimes, I'm 61 now. I think, boy, wouldn't it be cool if I could run like I was 22 on the tennis court, and I could do this and heal more quickly. But when you're 61, you think, hey, I don't have to be doing hard stuff all the time like I did back in my 20s and 30s, et cetera, and being productive all the time. I can be more the Yoda type guy who's looking at it from a different perspective. And it's nice. And it's also nice to know that you don't have to be on this planet for another 50 to 70 years. You've got a destination that at some point it's going to be here, and then you're going to be able to kind of wave goodbye and do that final bow out and say, hey, I did my job, and now I'm going to do a different type of picnic, if you believe in the hereafter, or go to a different realm, or just be thankful and gratitude for the time that you've had here, and wish everybody the best in the overpopulated world that we've become and the contaminated world that we've become. And so, it's not a bad place to be, age 61. Over to you for your final thoughts.
I love the way you're promoting this welcoming, open mindset to the seasons of life and growth and aging. I love that you're highlighting like regular people who are lifelong athletes. Like if we can all see ourselves as lifelong movers and athletes, it's like a shift of perspective. It's like just because I'm not a college, NCAA athlete means I hang up the cleats forever and I die. It's like you should move as much as possible throughout life. We should all move as much as possible throughout life. I love another person that I'll quote or mention, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He wrote the book Flow, and he promoted this idea of, and that's where I get my business name, Flow State Yoga Therapy, that we want to find these like cognitively integrative, immersive activities as much as possible on a daily basis, not once a week, but on a daily basis. Being in nature, playing with children, enjoying the sport or movement practice that you love to do, playing music, writing, painting. What immerses you? Where does the mind like just kind of stop thinking and start just being there? So like how can we just live more in a flow state? And that's what Hickson Gracie's book is about, a life in flow.
All right, so I have a challenge for Dan Rosenak right now, and that is to pick up a copy. Amazon's a good place, of Sedentary Nation, which I consider my Mr. Holland's opus. And just to give you a little idea, I started out with a lot of questions and a lot of good interactions with people like Dan. And I said, I've got this body of knowledge. I'm going to write this book. And then each of my books takes me about 4 years because I do a lot of research and a lot of editing. And editing, rewriting is the hardest part. And then you hand it to people to read it, and they say, you got to change this. And then you go back into it again. So Sedentary Nation is kind of my Mr. Holland's opus. I hold it up there with, books by Harvard professors. And actually there was a Harvard professor who wrote a book very similar to mine, and we wrote ours at the same time. And I purposely didn't read his. His came out a few months or a year before mine did. But we use a lot of the same language. The way we talk about sedentism and dysfunction were very similar. And I'm so pleased that I came out with some of the same philosophy that he did in about the same time. So that's how energy works in this. Some people call it a cosmic consciousness, and you're reading and listening at the same time in humanity. So that book is out, and that's the only book I know that traces the history of hunting and gathering to farming and looking at physical movement, to industrialization, to service-oriented society, to modern, living on the computer and the iPhone type of a life, and how to handle physical movement and mindset and open heart and open mind throughout that process. So you might be able to use that journey, because I'm a little older than you. I've been through a different journey, for your own self and your kids, and then with your students and your people you're providing therapy for. Say, hey, read a chapter a week or a chapter a month, and see if this resonates with you. And the reason I think it'll help people is because the studies are showing that when you need to make a change, you're looking at high school people, they need to make a change. What they're finding is if you give them information and tell them the why is a big deal, and it goes into your conscious and your unconscious mind. and it actually can produce long-lasting, sustainable changes in behavior and consciousness. So that's what I'm hoping that book does to people. And then I've got other books that are complementary, as I mentioned, The Aging Athlete, and then Raising a Child Athlete. And then I've got more things that I want to produce, and I hope those, I consider them well written because they have a lot of work and editing went into them. I hope those books will, outlast me in a positive way, and that'll be perhaps, along with my YouTube channel, my gifts to the people who come after me.
I really respect your work and this journey that you're sharing. The books are on order, and I have been reading your blog posts. I love the one where you kind of go through the historical timeline of our sedentary kind of complex that we have now. Really interesting pathway that you outline. So thank you for your work, and really, thank you for having me on to talk.
Yeah, let's do it again, and I'll have this video edited, Dan, and I'll send it over to you, and we can share it with our people and our outreach, and do this again when we have a topic that motivates us to reconnect. And I think this has been wonderful. I'm so glad I met you out doing my stretches on the tree at the beach.
Yes.
And I'm the tree hanger you met in Santa Barbara, and if the tree's still there, you'll see me there anytime I'm in Santa Barbara at that tree.
Yeah, so it's so perfect, it's natural connection happening.
So we're asking you, viewers, if you like this, to please give us a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing, and take a look at Dan's website when it's out, and the books that I've offered to you. And I hope this information has been entertaining, and this exchange has been helpful to you. And big mahalo and big aloha.
Thank you, Sifu.